Did you know there was a moment when one of the biggest, most beloved stars in Hollywood stood up and, in his own quiet but unmistakable way, said to the entire industry, "F you." It sounds shocking, doesn't it? I mean, Hollywood is supposed to be the dream, right? A place where people spend their lives fighting to get in, fighting to stay relevant, fighting to keep their names shining. And here was a man who had it all: fame, wealth, fans, and a career most actors could only dream of, turning his back and walking away. But if you really think about it, can you blame him? We've all been there in some way, haven't we? Feeling like no matter how much we give, no matter how hard we try, the very people we thought would stand by us end up judging us, turning their backs on us when we need them most. Maybe it happened to you at work. Maybe in your family. Maybe with friends you trusted. It's a pain you never really see coming, and it cuts deep. That's exactly what happened to Johnny Depp. For decades, Johnny was more than just a movie star, he was a cultural icon. He didn't just play characters, he became them. He had this rare ability to disappear into roles that nobody else could have pulled off. Edward Scissorhands, the shy, soft-hearted misfit with blades for fingers. Jack Sparrow, the charming, unpredictable pirate who stole our hearts. The eccentric Willy Wonka. The tortured Sweeney Todd. Each performance was different, but one thing stayed the same: his uniqueness. He wasn't like the other leading men in Hollywood, and that was his magic. Directors loved working with him because he brought something unpredictable to every scene. Fans loved him because he didn't try to be perfect. He was real. He was flawed. He was human. And for years, it worked. He was one of the highest paid actors in the world. He had millions of adoring fans. He was the kind of star whose name alone could sell out theaters. But all of that changed. Almost overnight, the man who was once everyone's favorite became Hollywood's outcast. It all started when his marriage to Amber Heard fell apart. At first, it was just another Hollywood breakup. The tabloids ran their usual gossip, speculating about why it didn't work out. But then Amber came forward with accusations that shook Johnny's world. She claimed he had abused her. She filed for a restraining order. She went public with photos of bruises and told her story to anyone who would listen. And people listened. Almost immediately, Johnny was painted as the villain. Headlines called him a monster. Talk shows turned him into a punchline. Social media tore him apart. People who had worked with him for years, people who claimed to be his friends, suddenly distanced themselves. Studios panicked. Roles he'd already been cast in were taken away. Entire franchises, like Fantastic Beasts, dropped him. The same industry that had celebrated him for decades now seemed embarrassed to even say his name. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? To give your life, your talent, your heart to an industry, only to have it turn its back on you at the first sign of trouble? To have your character judged not in a courtroom, but in the headlines? Johnny later said it felt like he was guilty until proven innocent. And the weight of that was crushing. Now, a lot of people in his position would have just done what Hollywood wanted. Issue a public apology. Pretend to be sorry, even if you weren't. Do the whole PR tour to rehabilitate your image. That's the game in Hollywood, and everyone knows it. But Johnny? He refused to play. Instead, he made a choice. He decided to stop caring about what Hollywood thought. He decided that his own integrity was more important than his career. That he would rather lose everything than admit to something he didn't do. And that's when, in his quiet way, he told Hollywood, "F you." Not in a speech. Not in a tweet. But in his actions. He walked away from roles. He stopped begging for work. He stopped pretending to be the version of himself that Hollywood wanted. Instead, he turned his focus inward. He went back to his roots, to his first love, music. He toured with his band. He painted. He spent time with his family. He surrounded himself with the people who still believed in him, even when the rest of the world didn't. And little by little, something amazing happened. People started listening to his side of the story. It didn't happen overnight. It took years. But as the court case unfolded, the public began to see that maybe things weren't as black and white as they seemed. That maybe Johnny wasn't the villain he had been made out to be. And when the verdict finally came down in his favor, it felt like a moment of justice. Not just for him, but for anyone who's ever been falsely accused. Anyone who's ever been judged unfairly. Because that's the bigger point here. Johnny wasn't just fighting for himself. He was making a statement. He was standing up for everyone who's ever been hurt by lies and still found the courage to tell their truth. One of his closest friends shared something he said during that time. Johnny told them, "I'd rather lose everything than live a lie." That kind of strength is rare. Especially in a place like Hollywood, where so much is built on image and illusion. Even in his darkest moments, Johnny managed to hold on to his sense of humor. That part of him, the quiet wit, the dry little grin that fans had always loved about him, never completely faded, even when the world seemed determined to crush him. There's something about that kind of resilience, isn't there? Something quietly heroic about a man who can stand there, with everything he'd worked for slipping through his fingers, and still crack the faintest smile. And that's exactly what happened on that unforgettable night at the red carpet. It was a chilly evening, the kind of night where the air seems heavy and charged with whispers. The press was everywhere, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, fans lining the barricades with their phones ready, trying to get just one picture, one video of the man who, despite everything, still drew a crowd. Everyone knew it was going to be awkward. He knew it too. This was one of his first major public appearances after months, no, years, of brutal headlines and endless gossip columns tearing him apart. The world had painted him as a villain, a has-been, someone too toxic to touch. And yet, he showed up anyway. He walked out of that black SUV, his long coat draped over his shoulders, sunglasses perched low on his nose even though it was evening. The familiar rings on his fingers gleamed under the lights as he waved half-heartedly to the screaming fans. His face was thinner than before, a little more worn, a little more tired, but his eyes still had that spark, that knowing, mischievous twinkle that told you he wasn't broken yet. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some booed. Some just stared. It was a strange mix, adoration and judgment swirling in the same cold night air. But he walked that carpet anyway, one slow, deliberate step at a time, as if daring them all to look away. Then came the questions. The reporters swarmed him like bees. Microphones were shoved in his face. Everyone wanted the soundbite, the headline, the moment they could twist into another day of gossip. You could hear the harshness in their questions, almost accusatory. "Johnny, how are you holding up?" one voice shouted above the rest, sharp and pointed, almost mocking. For a split second, he just stood there. He could have said nothing. He could have lashed out. He could have walked away and refused to play along, the way many in his place probably would have. But instead, he smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't the charming, confident grin of his Jack Sparrow days. It was faint, almost fragile, the kind of smile that said he knew they were trying to bait him and he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. And then he said it, softly, simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Still here." That was it. Just 2 words. But in that moment, they carried the weight of everything he'd been through, and everything he still was. He didn't need to defend himself, not right then. He didn't need to explain his side or plead his case. He didn't need to convince anyone of anything. Those 2 little words said everything he couldn't, or wouldn't, put into a longer speech. Still here meant he hadn't given up. It meant he was still standing. It meant no matter how much they tried to tear him down, he refused to disappear quietly. And something about the way he said it, that faint smile, that quiet defiance, made the crowd fall silent for just a second. Even the reporters, so ready to pounce, hesitated. It reminded everyone watching that no matter how broken someone may seem, they can still hold on to their dignity. They can still find that little ember of strength inside, even when the world has done everything it can to snuff it out. For Johnny, those 2 words became more than just an answer to a reporter's question. They became his mantra, his quiet rebellion against a system that tried to cast him aside. Still here. Still standing. Still himself. And maybe, in some small way, it reminded all of us that even in our own darkest moments, we can still be here too. 2 little words. But they spoke volumes. They said, "You didn't break me. I'm still standing." So, what can we learn from his story? For one, never let someone else define your worth. There will always be people who want to tear you down, who believe the worst about you without even knowing you. But that doesn't mean they're right. Speak your truth. Even when it feels like no one is listening. Even when it costs you everything. And don't be afraid to walk away from toxic people. Even if they're powerful. Even if they hold the keys to your dreams. Because your peace of mind, your integrity, your self-respect, those are things no one should be able to take from you. And if you're wondering if Johnny regrets telling Hollywood to shove it, well, just look at him now. He may not be at the top of the box office anymore. He may not be the darling of the industry. But he's smiling again. He's free. He stood his ground. And in the end, that's worth more than any role, any award, any amount of fame. So what about you? Have you ever felt judged unfairly? Have you ever had people turn their backs on you before they even heard your side? If you have, you're not alone. Maybe Johnny's story can remind you that it's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to hold your head high, even when everyone else wants you to bow it. Because no one else gets to decide who you are. That's yours to define. Now, I'd really love to hear from you. What's one moment in your life when you had to stand up for yourself? Maybe it was something small. Or maybe it was something huge that changed everything. Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, and you want to hear more stories that peel back the curtain on Hollywood and show you the real people behind the headlines, stick around for the next one. And if you haven't already, go ahead and click like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the little bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because just like Johnny, we're not backing down either. We're just getting started. And no matter what they say, we're still here. See you in the next one.